Ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves, because what you about to hear is one of the biggest economic power shifts happening right now in Africa. For the first time in modern history, India has officially taken over a major African commodity market, the palm kernel industry, leaving the United States stunned, confused, and scrambling for answers. Yes, you heard that correctly. Across West Africa, from Nigeria to Ghana to Sierra Leone to Liberia, India is buying, processing, refining, and investing in palm kernel at a rate the U.S. has never matched. And today, the tables have turned. Africa is no longer looking west. Africa is looking east. This is Eazicho Africa, and in this explosive documentary, we break down how India quietly took control of Africa's palm kernel supply, how it affects global markets, why the U.S. never saw this coming, and what this means for future power in Africa. Grab your headphones. Settle in. This one is big. Palm kernel oil is not just oil. It is the hidden powerhouse behind global cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, soap and detergent industries, industrial lubricants, food processing, biofuel, and even renewable energy experiments. Every time someone in the world uses shampoo, bar soap, cooking oil, body cream, chocolate, or packaged snacks, there's a high chance palm kernel oil is inside. This makes palm kernel one of the most valuable agricultural commodities on Earth. For decades, the United States dominated global refining and distribution through multinational corporations, Procter & Gamble, Cargill, ADM, Kimberly-Clark, and others. Their factories processed African palm kernel into finished goods that were sold worldwide. But then something unexpected happened. India stepped in, quietly, strategically, and aggressively. India realized two things. Africa has the world's largest untapped supply of palm kernel. The U.S. is losing its grip on commodity dominance due to shifting global alliances. India's government and private companies created a new strategy. Instead of waiting for African raw materials to reach Western markets, India went directly to Africa. Indian investors began buying local mills. Indian traders began signing exclusive contracts with rural farmers. Indian processors established supply chains that went from African villages straight to Indian factories. In less than 10 years, India became the #1 buyer and processor of African palm kernel oil. And the entire U.S. industrial scene didn't notice until it was too late. Because the moment Africa started diversifying its trade partners, the West lost its monopoly. This shift marks a major blow to U.S. influence in African agriculture. And the shockwaves are still spreading. Here on Eazicho Africa, we go deeper. Africa's shift toward India wasn't random. It was deliberate and understandable. Let's break down the 7 main reasons why African producers now prefer India. While Western buyers often undervalued African farmers, India did something simple but revolutionary. It offered better prices per ton. If a U.S.-linked buyer paid $180 per ton, Indian buyers offered $220. Then $250, then $300 depending on the season. Farmers talk. Communities talk. Countries take notice. India positioned itself as a fair trading partner. For decades, African farmers complained about Western supply chains filled with agents, subagents, export brokers, pricing manipulators. India removed all of them. Indian processors built direct-to-factory supply routes. For farmers, this meant more money, faster payments, clear contracts, fairer treatment, no bureaucracy, no hidden fees. The U.S. approach focused on large corporations that operated from abroad. India's approach? Invest in rural communities. Indian-African partnerships have built small-scale palm kernel cracking mills, processing sheds, storage warehouses, weighing stations, local road improvements. When farmers saw Indian investors building infrastructure in their villages, the choice became obvious. Africa and India share colonial histories, agricultural economies, large rural populations, similar climates, similar crop cycles. Because of this, Indian extension workers easily build trust with African farmers. They understand rainfall problems, seed quality, soil depletion, rural poverty, market manipulation. This cultural closeness makes partnerships smoother. Western aid often comes with political conditions, ideological expectations, governance requirements. India's message to Africa is simple. We buy, you grow. Let's prosper together. No political strings. No interference. Western technology is expensive, too advanced, often incompatible with rural Africa's energy limitations. India offers affordable machines, easy-to-maintain crushers, simple boilers, low-power refining systems. African small businesses can actually use them. US and European processors reject moist kernels, broken kernels, mixed grades, lower oil content. India buys everything. Why? Because Indian factories specialize in refining even the lowest grade kernel into usable material. Africa loves this because nothing goes to waste. This is why Africa turned away from the US and toward India. And this is why America is in economic shock. India's palm kernel dominance didn't happen by accident. It is rooted in three major strengths. India runs some of the world's largest palm kernel crushing and refining plants. States like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat all run industrial clusters capable of processing millions of tons annually. African supply is simply perfect for India's hunger. India's population of over 1.4 billion consumes enormous amounts of soap, detergent, cooking products, cosmetics. Palm kernel oil is essential in all of them. Why would India rely on the US supply chain when it can build one directly with Africa? India can refine palm kernel cheaper than America, Europe, Singapore, Malaysia. This gives India global price dominance. So when Indian buyers come to Africa, they offer better deals because refining back home is cheaper. This combination of cheap refining, huge factories, massive demand, turned India into the world's #1 processor of African palm kernel. And America has no way to compete. Washington is stunned because America assumed Africa would always depend on Western trade systems. But three things blindsided the US. African nations are shifting away from one-sided Western trade relationships. They want diversified partners, better prices, technology transfer, infrastructure investments. The US assumed Africa would stay loyal. Africa disagreed. While Indian buyers were visiting rural African warehouses, US companies sat in boardrooms. While India negotiated directly with farmers, US corporations negotiated with middlemen. While India built rural mills, US corporations focused on global corporate strategy. They simply didn't see the shift. America is used to China challenging its dominance. But India? The US assumed India was focused on domestic issues. It failed to notice India quietly building one of the world's largest refining industries, a global agricultural import network, a South-South trade alliance. By the time Washington woke up, India already controlled African supply routes, and America realized it had lost access to one of the world's most valuable commodities. This is why US analysts call the shift a strategic surprise, a missed signal, a silent economic coup. But here on Eazicho Africa, we call it what it truly is, a new world order emerging. The rise of India-Africa palm kernel trade is transforming entire economies. Let's break down the top beneficiaries. Nigeria is the largest producer of palm kernel in Africa. Indian demand has increased village incomes, boosted small processors, revived abandoned mills, pushed new investments in Oyo, Ogun, Edo, Delta, Cross River, Akwa Ibom, Abia, Anambra, and Imo states. Nigerian farmers say the same thing. India buys everything. India pays fast. That alone changed the economy. Ghana's quality control system attracted Indian buyers seeking reliable exports. Ghana now sells tens of thousands of tons to India yearly. The revenue is helping expand rural roads, local warehouses, farmer associations. India also partnered with Ghanaian refiners to upgrade machinery. Sierra Leone's recovery economy is benefiting massively. Indian companies financed village crushers, drying yards, community processing co-ops. For many Sierra Leonean farmers, India became their #1 buyer. After years of civil challenges, Liberia found a major trade partner in India. Indian importers helped revitalize plantation zones, river ports, rural cooperatives. Liberia's palm kernel industry is experiencing its fastest growth in decades. Cameroon produces exceptionally high-quality kernel oil. Indian demand boosted industrial mills, export logistics, youth employment. Cameroon's exports to India are increasing sharply. In all these countries, one thing is clear. India didn't just buy raw materials. India invested in people, something the US did not do. This is bigger than palm kernel. It is about global influence. Here are the four major global consequences. For 70 years, America controlled cocoa processing, palm oil and kernel supply chains, cotton, rubber, coffee distribution. Africa supplied, America processed. The world bought American products. But now, Africa supplies, India processes. The world buys Indian products. The entire economic structure has changed. For decades, China dominated African trade. India is now joining the battlefield. Africa now has two major Asian partners competing to buy its commodities. This is good for Africa. More competition equals better prices. If one buyer offers low prices, Africa now has alternatives. This ends decades of Western price manipulation. Africa is no longer the junior partner. Africa is now the decider. For the first time, the developing world is building economic systems that exclude the traditional Western powers. India and Africa are showing the world. We can trade with each other. We don't need the West to survive. This is a major shift in global geopolitics. Here are the three big future developments. Instead of exporting raw palm kernel to India, India may soon build full refining plants inside Africa. This means more jobs, more industrialization, more value captured locally. Africa becomes a manufacturer, not just an exporter. Expect new U.S. agricultural offers, U.S.-Africa trade meetings, attempts to win back commodity control. But Africa now has options. With India's support, Africa could produce better hybrid seedlings, larger plantations, more efficient mills, renewable energy from kernel shells. Africa's entire agro-industrial sector could transform. Ladies and gentlemen, India has taken over Africa's palm kernel market, and the world is feeling the impact. The United States is shocked because it assumed Africa would always depend on Western buyers. But those days are over. Africa is now choosing partners who respect it, choosing partners who pay fairly, choosing partners who invest in communities. India understood Africa's value. India treated Africa as a partner, not a supplier. And Africa responded. This is not just an economic shift. It is a civilizational shift. A new world order is emerging, where Africa decides its own destiny, where India becomes a major global economic force, where the United States must rethink its position. Here on Iazicho Africa, we will continue to follow this story because it represents the changing heartbeat of global power. Africa is rising. India is rising. And the world will never be the same. If you enjoyed this deep breakdown, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more powerful African economic stories from your #1 voice, Iazicho Africa.